Good afternoon, colleagues. I'm Mr. Leo, Subject Advisor of Accounting from Harib District. Today I'm going to discuss with you the marking guideline of our paper 1 June examination paper that was written today. So we can start, colleagues. We check the marking principles. Marking principle number 1, penalties for foreign items are applied only if the candidate is not losing marks elsewhere in the question for that item. No foreign item penalty for misplaced item. No double penalty applied. So remember, colleagues, we have penalties -1 or minus something, the -1 of -2 on foreign items and so on. But number 1, it says penalty for foreign items are applied only if the candidate is not losing marks elsewhere. So we need to check, especially in the income statement. Learners can use foreign items like write debtors control in the income statement, writing equipment in the income statement, and so on. So those are regarded as foreign items. So we need to make sure that we don't double penalize a learner, and then no foreign item penalty for misplaced item. So for example, in the income statement, remember we have interest on loan as part of the interest expense, but in some cases learners might misplace the item and indicate it under operating expenses, where they write telephone and water and electricity, but they are not supposed to write interest on loan there. They're supposed to write it under as interest expense. So no foreign item penalty for misplaced. So if they are misplacing the item, we just mark it wrong and not penalize a learner. Marking guideline number 2, marking principle number 2, penalties for placement or poor presentation, e.g. details, are applied only if the candidate is earning marks on the figures for that item. So remember, we have placement or we have poor presentation of the statement, e.g. details. Like for example, in the balance sheet, learners under current assets might not write the details as expected according to the format and the structure of the statement, and maybe instead of writing inventory, trade and other receivables, as well as cash and cash equivalents, maybe they write debtors control, trading stock and bank separately, which is wrong or poor presentation of the statement. Full marks for correct answer. If the answer is incorrect, mark the workings provided. We'll see when we check the income statement. We start on the right to mark. If the answer is correct, we give full marks. If the answer is not correct, we mark a working on our left-hand side in brackets. If a pre-adjustment figure is shown as a final figure, allocate a part mark for the working for that figure, not the method mark for the answer. So we'll also check, especially in the income statement, if the amount of rent is allocated a mark, but the learner did not calculate the adjustment and made adjustment on the figure, but decided to write the amount from the trial balance as a final figure, we need also to mark it from there. Unless otherwise indicated, the positive or negative effect of any figure must be considered to award the mark. If no plus or sign, my negative sign or bracket is provided, assume that the figure is positive. Remember, in the income statement or in the cash flow statement, where learners are supposed to show outflow and inflow, they have to show the signs, and the positive sign and the negative sign. Will also think about that. In the income statement, where cost of sales, where operating expenses supposed to be in brackets, we'll also check that. Where indicated part marks may be awarded to differentiate between differing qualities of answers from candidates, we need to make sure that we understand exactly how to deal with part marks. Where penalties are applied, the marks for that section of the question cannot be a final negative. If we are awarding or we are penalizing learners, but a learner cannot end up with a negative mark. Where method marks are awarded for operation, the marker must inspect the reasonableness of the answer before awarding the mark. Operation means check operation. 1 part correct means operation and 1 part correct. So we need to make sure about number 9, where we talk about operation, we are merely talking about just the adding or subtracting of the figures, despite one being correct. But where it says 1 part correct, it means one of the figures must be correct for a learner to gain a method mark. Note, check operation means plus or minus or multiply or divide as per memo. So we need to make sure of that, colleagues. Number 10, in awarding method marks, ensure that candidates do not get full marks for any item that is incorrect, at least in part. In such cases, do not award a method mark. Indicate by a way of method wrong. That is that X in a box. So remember, colleagues, a learner cannot get full marks if there is something wrong within the answer. We are on number 11. Be aware that some candidates provide valid alternatives beyond the memorandum. So we need to make sure, we need to consult our subject advisors where we are not sure or something like that. Some learners will give alternative answers beyond the memorandum that are not given as alternative answers in the memorandums, but they are correct. So we need to make sure, if you are not sure of something, do check with your subject advisor and get an advice on such cases. Codes F equals to foreign item, P equals to placement. Where you penalize a learner, you need to make sure minus 1F, minus 1P to show that you are penalizing a learner on foreign item or you are penalizing a learner on a placement. So you don't just say minus 1 or minus something, you need to say minus 1F or minus 1P. Okay, colleagues, let's move to question 1. This is the income statement, colleagues. Sales, remember, we are not supposed to get any workings in brackets. So learners were supposed to calculate. If you check adjustment number 1, they were given a profit markup of 60%. So learners were supposed to use the given amount of cost of sales, this figure. They were supposed to use this figure to calculate the cost of sales. If they've shown the calculation there of 4,200,000 multiplied by 100 divided by 160, then it's still fine. But we mark the final answer, not the workings in brackets. So the final answer is supposed to be 6,720,000, which is 2 accuracy marks. It means, colleagues, it must be 2 marks or 0. If it's 6,720,000, 2 marks. If it's anything else except 6,720,000, then it's wrong. But for the gross profit, we only work with operation here. So if a learner say the sales minus the cost of sales, a learner will get that particular answer there, which is 2,520,000 to get that method mark. Even if the cost of sales figure is wrong, but it was the cost of sales was correctly subtracted from the figure. Let's say a learner calculated the sales amount, but the learner by mistake got 5 million. So the 5 million will be wrong. But if a learner takes 5 million minus 4,200,000, a learner will end up with a gross profit of 800,000. In that case, a learner out of this 3 marks, a learner will only get 1 mark of gross profit because it's an operational mark, which is a method mark there. Okay, let's move. A discount received figure was given on the answer sheet. With rent income, we start in brackets. This figure is the amount from the trial balance. If it's 1 mark, a learner must open a bracket and write this figure to earn that 1 mark. Then a learner will qualify for this one. But then here, we need to say both the sign and the amount must be correct. So it definitely has to be a negative 35,200 for a learner to get these 2 accuracy marks. So the answer must be correct. Both the sign and the amount must be correct. If it's positive 35,800, then it's wrong. If it's negative something else and not 35,800, then it's wrong. But then a learner will also earn this method mark there. So it means a learner can get 2 out of 4 if this figure is wrong, because a learner will definitely get this figure from the trial balance as given 1 mark, and then a learner subtracted a wrong figure will get it wrong, but a learner will get this final answer as a method mark. So Elena qualifies to get this one and this one correct. If it happens that Elena did not show any calculations here, but showed 236,200 as a final answer, let's say for example is 236. So let's say here Elena wrote 236,200 as a final answer, and Elena did not have any calculations there, then we'll definitely mark the final answer there, and then we'll give a mark there. Remember, because Elena did not show the calculation in brackets, but Elena showed the pre-adjustment trial balance figure as a final figure, we'll definitely give a mark there and allocate a mark there to that Elena, colleagues. Fine. So by adding the two, Elena will qualify for a method mark there, even if this figure is wrong, but that one is, Elena will earn a mark, and then Elena, just by adding the two, Elena will get that method mark. All right, and then by adding these two, the gross profit plus the operating income, Elena will get this one as an operation. So even if the two figures are wrong, but they were added correctly, and Elena will definitely earn this figure there, colleagues. So it means here, sales minus cost of sales, and this part mark, and then to get this figure, Elena has to add these two, get that one free, get these two together, and then to get the gross operating income, Elena will also earn a mark there. Okay, colleagues, let's move. Discount allowed was given on the answer sheet. Audit fees, you must be very careful, colleagues. Here with audit fees, we are not going to mark anything in brackets. So the final answer, it must be 133,200. So it's 133,200, 2 marks or 0. If it's not 133,000 as a final answer, it's something else, then it's 0. If 133 is shown in brackets there as one of the figures, it cannot be marked there. It must be marked as a final figure, and it counts for 2 marks. If 133 is in brackets, then it's 0, because we are looking here, the final answer definitely must be 133,200. Anything else except 133, then 0. Director's fees, we start here, amount from the trial balance, 1 mark, and then we need a negative 18,200 for 2 marks. If this one is correct, this one is wrong, Elena will get a method mark there. Or if Elena decided to show the calculation of 673,400 multiplied by 37 months, multiply by 36 divided by 37 months to get that figure of 655,200, Elena will get full marks. Remember, colleagues, what we said, we check on the right, the final answer. If Elena without calculations, nothing there, but Elena has 655,200 as the final answer, Elena will not get 1 mark but full marks. Elena will get 1, 2, 3, 4 marks. So must be very careful. Some learners, they don't show calculations in brackets, but as teachers, we always advise them to show workings in brackets. But if it happens that a learner did not show workings in brackets, but a learner do have a final answer as correct, 655,200, we definitely need to make sure that we give full marks and not only this part mark. Sundry expense, nothing in brackets. A final answer must be 939,600. If it happens that this learner showed the brackets there, 936, 39, 600, and then because of time, Elena did not indicate the final answer there. Then let's say by mistake, Elena did not write a final answer there because of time, but Elena managed to write the amount of sundry expense there and nothing extra on that amount. We need to mark it also from there because it will be the same as the final answer. Because remember how do we teach our learners to write the amount from the trial balance, and then this is the amount and adjust on top of this amount. If because of time, learner did not have time to transfer the final answer, but nothing was added or subtracted on the answer, and this is exactly the final answer. We can also mark it from there, colleagues. So that is the story, and then we add all these four figures, 6,500 plus that, plus that, plus that, to get that figure. Remember, we work with what the learner has there, and then this final answer of operating expenses, a learner will get a method mark. Remember, colleagues, we said you must check reasonableness, but at least it must be more or less the correct answer of what the learner has there. So don't just give a method mark, we need to check. And the 1,734,500, which is the operating expenses, it must be in brackets. And then our gross operating income minus operating expenses, it will give us operating profit. Exactly again there, it does not have to be the correct as the memo, as long as is the difference between these two, and then a learner will earn a method mark there, colleagues. Let's move. Their interest income was not given, so we need to start there. So we must start from there. So the amount was given, the percentage of the net profit was given, so a learner was supposed to calculate using the 700,800 to calculate the net profit, the income tax. So income tax, it must be 259,200, and then 2 accuracy marks. And then a learner must apply a working backward principle to say 700,800 plus 259,200 to earn a mark for 960. So remember, the 960,000 is a method mark only if this figure was wrongly calculated, but it's supposed to be sub-added. So sometimes learners make a mistake of having this figure, and then when they calculate the net profit before tax working backward, they forget that this is one will change the sign, and then they subtract it again. So this figure will be wrong in that case, but it must be added. It means whatever a learner has there, it must be the total of what the learner has there. Okay, colleagues, so we are done with the income statement, 23 marks. 1.1.2, the share capital note. We start with there. These two things must not be swapped around, because according to the dates, the business purchased 60,000 shares before they issue 440. So learners must not swap around the information of the issued and the repurchase. So the 60,000 in bracket 1 mark, multiply by 7, 420,000 2 marks. Remember, 7 rand is supposed to be average price and not the issue price. So 8,400,000 divided by 1,200,000, it will definitely give us 7 rand. 60,000 multiplied by 7 rand, 420. So these are 2 accuracy marks, colleagues. 60,000 1 mark, 422 marks. So it must be 420,000 in brackets 2 marks or nothing. If a learner does not have 420 there, then it's wrong. With 60,000 1 mark, then or 0. So it can't be any other figure there except 60,000. The number of shares that were issued, 140 1 mark, 1,400,000. It is a balancing figure because we were not given the issue price there. So it means now a learner will have to calculate now information from there. 1,200,000 minus 60,000 minus 140,000 equals to 1,280,000. So 1,280,000 is a method mark. It means if any of these figures is wrong, but the learner calculated 1,200,000 minus 60 plus 40 equals to this figure, and any of these two figures is wrong, the final answer will not be the same as the memo, but a learner will qualify for a method mark. But remember, the repurchase price or the number of the repurchase shares must be subtracted. Then the 9,380,000 was given, and then we have to work backward. So we'll have 9,380,000 minus 420 minus 8,400,000 to get 1,200,000. 400,000. So it means here, colleagues, if 420 is wrong, but the learner calculated correctly, took this figure plus that one minus that one to get this figure, a learner will qualify for a method mark. So remember, the 4,420,000, which is the repurchase price, must be added when we work backwards to get a balancing figure of 1,400,000. So it must not be subtracted. When we move from this figure this way, whatever a learner has there, it must be added back to this figure, because we are applying a working backward principle. So if it's subtracted, then the balancing figure will not be correct, and then a learner will not get a method mark there. 7 marks. Let's go to retained income. Retained income, net profit, balance at the beginning, it was not given. It's a balancing figure. That's why it's a method mark, because the balance at the end was given. So we'll come to that. Net profit after tax, it was definitely given on the answer sheet, 1 mark or 0. It's supposed to be 700,800. Any figure except 700,800, then it's wrong. The repurchase of shares, 60,000 multiplied by 140 is 84,000. 2 marks or 1 method mark. So if a learner calculated there with showing the calculation, 60,000 multiplied by any figure except 140, and with the final answer in brackets will give a method mark, 1 mark. But if a learner has 84,000 as a final answer in brackets, we give 2 marks. But if it's not 84,000, but we have 60,000 as one part correct there, multiplied by something else except 140. Let's say, for example, like we see there, the issue price, the repurchase price is, the average price is 7 rand. If by mistake a learner here multiplied by 7 rand there, then the final answer will be wrong because of the final the multiplying by 7. But will definitely give a method mark because the 60,000 is correct. But if the final answer is correct as 84,000 in brackets, a learner will definitely get 2 marks. Interim or paid, 228,000, 1 mark. And then this supposed to be the calculation. The number of shares issued at the end, which is that figure there, is supposed to be there. Multiplied by 22 cents equals to that figure. If the figure is correct, it's 2 marks. If the figure is wrong, but you can see there, this figure is supposed to be the same as this one there. This one there. So if a learner calculated that figure wrong there, but it transferred the same figure as the number of shares issued at the end there, multiplied by 22, a learner will not end up with 281,600, but a learner will earn this method mark there because of one part correct of 22 cents and because of transferring the correct figure there. But if the final answer is the same as the memo, 281,600 is 2 marks. Then just by adding these two correctly, a learner will get that one free, even if it's not the same as the memo. Because of operation, adding those two together, learner will get that one free, and it must be in brackets. And then we move from 423,000 plus 509 plus 84,000 minus 700,000 to earn that one. So remember, when we apply a principle of working backwards, all the figures, second figures will change the signs. So we'll say 423 plus 509 plus 84 minus 700 to get that figure. So it does not have to be 315,800 because of the mistake of the learner, but it must follow the correct principle to say this figure plus this figure plus this figure minus that figure of the net profit to earn that method mark. So we must be very careful, colleagues, when we mark that part, especially with the method marks. Let's move to 1.1.3. The fixed asset is a balancing figure, so we'll come back to that. Fixed deposit 480,000, 450,000, it must be correct, 1 mark or 0. Inventories, we'll come back to that. Trade and other receivables, we need the workings in brackets. 796,000 for debtors control minus 38,300 for provision for bad debts, and both the sign and the amount must be correct, colleagues, to get that 1 mark. If provision for bad debts is added, then it's wrong. It's supposed to be subtracted. Plus 18,200, 1 mark, minus 10,000. 10,000 must not be added, it must be subtracted. So 1 mark for that. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and the final answer 1 mark. If any of the figures is not there, but at least there are 2, 1 or more which are correct, a learner will definitely earn that one free. So the 389 will also be a method mark as well as the answer. So we'll come back to that. Share capital, this figure here must be the same figure as the one from the share capital note there. So if they are the same, a learner will definitely earn that figure as a method mark. And then to add these two together to get that one. If this figure is wrong here, it's not the same as the memo, but it's the same as the figure that the learner has from the share capital, then it will be marked here correctly because a learner will qualify for this method mark. And if a learner takes the wrong figure added to 423, a learner will also get that figure, that mark right, colleagues. With the loan, we have 570,000 as given from the trial balance, minus 180 calculated from the adjustment, accuracy mark, this plus that minus that, 390 method mark. It means if the 570 is there, 1 mark, a learner subtracted 100,000, a learner got 470 as the final answer there, a learner will earn a method mark there and forfeit these 2 marks because it's supposed to be negative 180,000. We are not going to allocate a mark for that figure there because it was not allocated there. And then trade and other payables, 516 for creditors control, 35,800 as calculated, and then plus 33,300 and then minus 10,000. So we also have to mark that. Remember, colleagues, the income statement and the balance sheet was the same question. So it means we need to go back and check the rent income figure, the 35,800, that represent income received in advance. And income received in advance is part of trade and other payables. So this figure might not be the same as on the memo, which is 35,800, but it must be the same figure as the one that the learner subtracted from the rent income. If that is the case, a learner will earn that method mark. So this 516 accuracy, 35,800 method mark, you check the figure that the learner has from the rent income, 33,300, the 10,000 must be subtracted. So remember, the 10,000 is the same 10,000 that was transferred between the debtor and the creditor, and the 576 method mark. If any of the figure is right here, 1 mark. Shareholders for dividends, this figure, a method mark, it must be the same figure as the one that is there from the final or the amount that was declared for dividends. So it must be the same. Current portion of the loan, this figure, when you mark it, you must check there, the loan, the same figure that was subtracted there. If it's the same figure as the one indicated there, then a learner will earn a method mark there, colleagues. SARS income tax is a balancing figure because we do have the amount there of current liabilities. It means a learner is supposed to take whatever figures they have there, 1,050,000 minus trade and other payables, minus shareholders for dividends, minus current portion of the loan to get this figure, and then a learner will earn a method mark. So this figure plus this figure plus this figure will give us the total of equity and liabilities. For operation is just by adding the 3 components, shareholders equity plus non-current liabilities. So a learner need to add this figure plus this figure plus this figure there to get this one. So if that is the case, Elena will definitely earn a part mark there, this figure here. And then Elena must take this figure here and transfer it to there to earn another method mark. That's why it says transfer equity and liabilities. So the figure of total equity and liabilities must be the same as the total assets. But when we check the operation of this plus that, it must be this one and this one must be transferred there. Then Elena will earn a mark there. Okay, colleagues. So remember here, we don't have this figure and we also don't have this figure. And we don't have that figure there. But then our equity and liabilities will be completed before the assets section. So we'll start with this figure because we'll transfer from the equity and liabilities and then we'll have it there. And then we have to use our ratios, our financial indicators, which is our current ratio and acid test ratio. So in this case, because the current liabilities was given, for us to calculate the current assets, the learner is supposed to use the current ratio, which is current assets is to current liability as it was given. So it was given as 1.8:1. So our current liabilities is 1, our current assets is 1.8. We are looking for 1.8 over the 1. So we need to take this figure 1,050,000 multiplied by 1.8 to get 1,890,000. So colleagues, we must be very careful. This figure is not a method mark, it's an accuracy mark. It must be correct as the memo because the current liability figure was given. All right, after getting this one, Elena is supposed to use the acid test ratio where they must use now the total of a current asset to subtract from that figure of the financial indicator. Remember, acid test is our current asset minus inventory. So whatever that is there on this financial indicator means it's only trade and other receivables plus cash and cash equivalent. So if we take 1.8 minus the ratio of the acid test, we'll be left with 0.7 that represent the inventory. So the current liabilities figure 1,050,000 multiply by 0.7 will get 735,000. It must be correct, colleagues. These two figures are not method marks, are accuracy figures because the current liability figure was given. So we need to make sure as colleagues, as teachers, that we teach our learners how to use financial indicators to calculate unknown or missing figures in the balance sheet. All right, colleagues, then Elena is supposed to take 1,890,000 minus 735 minus whatever Elena has there to get this figure as a method mark. So the only method mark is this one because of a balancing figure. And then Elena must take whatever they have there minus 1,890,000 to get that figure. So this figure does not have to be 9,353,000, but it must be the difference between whatever Elena has there and whatever Elena has there to earn that figure. Remember, even if the learner calculated this figure wrong, a learner will forfeit a mark there. But if a learner took a wrong figure here and subtracted 1 million that we don't know where the 1 million come from, and then a learner will earn that figure a part mark. And then that one minus the 450, a learner will also earn a mark there for fixed asset as a method mark. So it's out of 27. So we are done with question 1. Let's move to question 2, colleagues. The two figures, net profit before tax was given as well as depreciation. The interest expense 27,380 must be accuracy mark. If by mistake a learner showed this figure in brackets, then it's wrong. So remember the interest expense figure on the note of the cash flow, it must be positive. So nothing there. Learners were not supposed to write figures there. So please be aware and also inform them all the shaded areas on the answer sheet. They are not supposed to write figures there. Inventory 12,000 was given on the answer sheet. Increase in debtors, no calculations, only the final answer. It's supposed to be 59,720 in brackets, 2 marks. Increase in creditors 9,850. Learners might show calculations, but the final answers must be as they are there, because those two are accuracy marks, colleagues. So if 59,720 is there but positive, not in brackets, we don't award 2 marks. 9,850, if it's in bracket by mistake, no 2 marks. So make sure that when we teach our learners, they need to understand a principle of inflows and outflows. So these figures, they are 2 accuracy marks. Thank you, colleagues. Let's move 2.2, our calculation and our cash flow statement. These figures here, we did not need them, so learners were not supposed to write. Please advise learners and inform them in future if they get shaded areas like that, they don't have to calculate, because learners will waste a lot of time calculating those figures there that they were not supposed to calculate. Income tax, we have the amounts there, this plus that one. The final answer must be 37,000. If a learner did not show calculations there, but the final answer is correct as 37,000 in brackets, a learner will definitely get 4 marks, colleagues. But remember, when we teach our learners, we'll always advise them to use brackets so that they can earn part marks. But remember, we said we mark here. If the final answer is correct, 37,000 in brackets is 1, 2, 3, 4 marks full. But the 37,000, it must be in brackets. If the 37,000 is there, but it's not in brackets and no calculation, a learner will only earn 3 marks, 1, 2, 3, and not a method mark. Remember, we said a learner cannot get full marks if there is something wrong with the calculation. Colleagues must also be aware of alternative methods of calculating income tax. It means one learner can say negative 10,000, negative 4,000, negative 23, and end up with a negative 37,000. So it will still be correct and final marks. Dividends paid, we have the 22,000 plus 60,000 minus 28,000 to get 54,000. 1, 2, 3, and 54. Final answer in brackets 4 marks. 54,000 final answer not in brackets, only 3 marks. If there are workings in brackets, all the calculations correct, we mark workings in brackets and we don't allocate a method mark, a final answer, if the answer is not in bracket, so that a learner cannot get full marks if something is wrong there. All right, colleagues, fixed asset purchase, 549,000 1 mark, plus 15,800 1 mark, plus 17,000 1 mark, minus 420 5 marks each. If a learner do have 204,000 final answer in brackets, a learner qualify for 5 marks. But remember what we said, we supposed to encourage our learners to always use brackets to show calculations. Always be aware of alternative methods. Some learners might say 420,000 and then minus 549, minus 58, minus 17, but you'll still end up with 204,000 and so on. If a learner only said 549 minus 420, a learner and then did not write these two figures there, then a learner will earn 1 mark here, 1 mark there, and a method mark there if the answer is in brackets, and a learner will still forfeit it at 2 marks. So we must just be very careful there. All right, we are done there. Let's move the 9,000. It must be 9,000 in brackets, 2 accuracy. We move backward, 31,130 plus 9,000. It will give us that one. It's a method mark only if the operation was correctly followed. If this figure is positive, a learner will forfeit marks, and if it's positive, then a learner is supposed to say this minus that to get that figure and to qualify for the method mark. Let's move, colleagues. Calculate the following financial indicators on 31st December 2020. The asset ratio, our current assets minus inventory is to current liabilities. So the learner was supposed to follow the principles to say how much is our current assets minus stock, and then how much is our current liabilities. 2 marks for our current assets minus inventory, 2 marks for our current liabilities. If something is wrong but some figures are correct, a learner will get a method mark there. So that is the story. But the final answer is 1,55:1 or 1,6:1 to earn 5 marks. So only part mark is there if some of the figures are correct, but the final answer is wrong, and there it means a learner qualifies to get at least 3 out of 5 if something is wrong. 1 mark there, 1 mark there, and the final answer. And then the debt equity ratio to accuracy, our non-current liability 1 mark, 130,000 1 mark, 751 1 mark, any of the two 1, and then if any of the two is there, the final answer is 0,17:1 or 0,2:1. Operation 1 part correct. It means if these two figures are wrong, the final answer will be wrong. Learner will get a 0 because we are talking about operation 1 part correct. But if maybe a learner wrote 130,000 is to 200,000 and got that one wrong, 130 will be fine. The answer there will be wrong, but a learner will get a method mark there. Return on shareholders' equity, 77,000, no mark for that. A half 1 mark, 700, which is our average shareholders' equity, 496 1 mark, plus 751 1 mark, and then 623, which is these two together divided by 2, 1, 2, 3, so it's 3 marks. So let's check 1, 2, 3. I think the 770 supposed to also have a mark there, because if we count marks there, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, and it's supposed to be 5 marks. So it means our 777,000 supposed to have a mark there. So 35,000, fine. Question 3. Motloung Ltd comment on the price of 910 charged by Motloung Ltd for the new shares. Learners have to compare issue price of 910 with the NAV, which is the net asset value per share. If they compared the 910 with the net asset value, figures of 12 Rand and 10 Rand 70 or 10 Rand 73, then it's 2 marks. Expected response, the shares were issued at the average issue price. The existing shareholders are being re-awarded as the price is lower than 12 Rand charged at the JSE, and the NAV is 10 Rand 73. So it means the shares could have been issued at the market price. So the learners can also check here. We must also check their colleagues. We are talking about the market price of 12 Rand and the net asset value of 10 Rand 73. So learner need to compare 9 Rand 10 with 12 Rand of market price or market value, and compare also the 9 Rand with the market net asset value per share. So by quoting market price and the net asset value of 12 Rand and 10 Rand 73, a learner will get a mark there. By comparing 910 with this one, 910 with that one, 2 marks, and then for the figures, so part marks for partial or incomplete answers. So if a learner only mentioned few, but we need to check 910 and the market price, 910 and the net asset value. Explain how the issue of new shares has affected the financial gearing and the risk. Explanation 1-1, financial indicator 1-1, figures 1-1 to get 6. So learners need to check debt equity ratio by quoting debt equity ratio 1 mark, by quoting the trend that it decreased from 0,8:1 to 0,5:1, 1 mark, which is 1, 2, by quoting return on total capital employed 1 mark, that it has improved or increased from 15% to 20%, another 1 mark, and then 1, 1, 1, 1 will give us 4. And then a general comment of the 2, there a learner must talk about low risk or less risk to get 1 mark for the explanation. And then with a return on total capital employed, Elena supposed to quote that and candidates may also compare return on total capital employed to your estimate or current interest rate. So even if the current rate of the interest rate was not given on the question, learners can say the 20% is more than the interest rate. So we'll mark that as part of the explanation. Due to increased efficiency, profit on new branch, and so on. So if Andre wanted to retain his 60% shareholding in the company, how many shares would he have had to buy? We have the 700,000, which is the number of shares, multiplied by the 60% of the percentage shareholding. We must get 420,000. And then 500,000 multiplied by 60 is 300,000. So 420 minus 300 is 120,000. So the 200, which is the difference between 700 minus 200, the remaining shares, 200,000 multiplied by 60, we're supposed to have 120,000. How much would he have had to pay? Remember, they said the price is 9 Rand 10, so we need to take the 120 multiply by 9 Rand 10, and then we get 2 method marks. It means whatever Elena has there must be the same as there, but the 9 Rand 10 must also be there. So if Elena calculated this one wrong and get 50,000, then Elena took the same 50,000 multiplied by 910, Elena will get 2 method marks there. But don't just give 2 method marks without checking whatever the learner has there. It means if a learner did not write anything there, but calculated this figure, something multiplied by 910 is not for 120. A learner cannot get this 2 method mark there, because we need to confirm that figure from there to there. Okay, colleagues, let's move. Andre decided not to buy these shares. Apart from the percentage shareholding, explain 2 reasons why he has made a mistake by not taking up this option. Explanation, 2 reasons. So one explanation 2 marks, another explanation 2 marks, with figures 1 to qualify for 6 marks. His dividend would have increased by 61,200, which is 51% of the shares that he needed to buy. It is more than the interest he earns on the invest in his savings of 554,600. 1,092,000, see above the 5% of that figure. The 5% of this figure will give us the amount there. You could buy shares for capital growth, bought the shares at 9 Rand 10, and then he could sell it on the JSE. Remember, he was supposed to buy those shares at 9 Rand 10, but on the market the shares were valued at 12 Rand, so it was going to be a benefit. So learners might also mention the benefit and also mention the figure. He could have earned more dividends on bigger investment. Return on shareholders' equity will be 23% more on bigger investment. He would lose 120 votes at the AGM, Annual General Meeting. Comment on the liquidity. Learners need to quote 2 financial indicators that are liquidity ratios: current ratio, asset test ratio, or stock holding period. It decreased from that to that. This one decreased from that to that. Stock holding period efficient at 54 days, less than 2 months. So the liquidity situation has improved. So we need explanation, general comment for 2 marks, quoting current ratio 1 mark, quoting asset test ratio 1 mark, quoting the trend in terms of figures 1. So a learner can get 4 marks by just quoting the financial indicator with the trend, asset test with the trend, and so on. And a general comment must also be marked separate to earn 6 marks. A comment on the price paid by Mukwati Ltd for the repurchase of buyback of shares. The company is paying a premium above the average price in order to shareholders to give up their shares. They wanted to increase returns by increasing equity. This is a fair value, same as the price on the JSE. They must compare the 15 with any of this, the market price. or the market value, the net asset value, and the average. So we need to check the information there. Explain 3 ways in which Andre has benefited from the repurchase of shares. He has now become the majority shareholder, and then due to the reduced number of shares, his returns has improved. The earnings per share, the return on shareholders' equity, the earnings per share, and the ROSHE will also increase. And then reduced the number of shares could have contributed to an increase in the dividends per share. So we need to make sure that our learners understand and know exactly how to comment on such questions. Colleagues, discuss whether the buyback had any impact on the dividend payout policy of Mokwatsi. Let's check. Expected response 2020 and 2021 remained at 60.2%, and then we have to take our DPS divided by EPS multiply by 160.2% as well as that one. So we need to calculate this percentage and have the explanation to say it remained constant at 60.2% for question 3. Question 4, our audit report. Opinion 1 valuable point. The auditors found no problem to report unqualified report, 2 marks. If a learner just wrote unqualified report, 2 marks. Auditor did not find anything, met the requirements, it's a good report, nothing was found wrong there or whatever, and 2 marks. IFRS and Companies Act, 1 valid point. Compare, operate in local and international context, may have local and international shareholders, and so on. So we need to read the memorandum and compare with the answer. Part marks for partial answers must also be checked. Must cover local and global. So we need also to check the highlighted point there, colleagues. A learner, by answering this question, must compare a local and international context. Find independent. Their opinion is unbiased. They have no personal interest in the company, no conflict of interest, as they are independent and external auditors. Part marks, so it's 2 marks each, but if you feel that it's part mark, partial answer, you can allow or award a 1 mark there. 1 example of ethical responsibilities: no colluding with management, no accepting bribes, care taken in completing the audit, and then the readers can rely on the information, being honest, and so on. So partial answers will also be expected there, colleagues, but we need only 1 valid answer to get 2 marks. 1 example of audit evidence: check the internal control and the efficiency of the audit, internal audit. Source documents provided by external organization provide verification records such as asset register, stock records, etc., policies and procedures of the company, report of audit committee, and so on, to get 2 marks. So remember, this must also be marked, and partial answers can be awarded, and a learner can also get 1 out of 2 if you think there are some of the answers that are correct or partially correct. So colleagues, we are expecting our learners also to do good in question 4. So we need to make sure that when we mark and do our error analysis, we identify the mistakes done by the learners, so that when we do our analysis and we prepare for the trial examination, we need to make sure that audit report and cooperative governance question will not give us a problem in future. So if you have any questions, colleagues, do check with your, we are done with our memo discussion. Good luck over the weekend to prepare for paper 2 on Monday. May Andrews will be back on Monday to discuss the memo discussion of paper 2. If you do have any questions, colleagues, please do contact your subject advisor and ask questions. Do not just give marks. Do not just penalize learners. So give learners marks where they are due. If you are not sure of something, do check with your subject advisor and contact your subject advisor and discuss, so that you give marks as expected, colleagues. Good luck for preparing learners over the weekend for paper 2, and all of the best. Thank you very much. Bye.